talking about the Stanley Cup final just ended earlier today. For me, for those of you watching this video, by the time this comes out, it will have ended yesterday. Two quick notes right off the top. If you want to win a Stanley Cup, do not sign Corey Perry. This is now the fourth Stanley Cup final that Corey Perry has lost in the last 5 years. So, if you're a team that's on the bubble, don't sign Corey Perry. Secondly, if you want to win a Stanley Cup final, make sure you get a former captain for the Buffalo Sabres. This is now the second year in a row that a former Buffalo Sabres captain has won the Stanley Cup. Okposo this year, then obviously Jack Eichel last year. But I just want to give some overall thoughts on this series, and specifically on this Game 7. This series was looking very boring and one-sided at one point, and then it quickly got very, very interesting. Obviously the Panthers, they went up 3-0, and they looked completely dominant doing so, especially those first 2 games. The Edmonton Oilers just looked completely outclassed. They looked completely shut down. And then by the time the Panthers went up 3-0, we were all kind of expecting a sweep. There was a certain point where I thought that the Celtics and then the Panthers were both gonna just sweep their series, and I was gonna do back-to-back videos talking about sweeps. Obviously neither of those happened, but then, that in that third period of Game 3, that's when things started to look a little bit shaky. Bobrovsky allowed 2 goals. The Panthers obviously leave that Game 3 with a win. But then that Game 4 happened. What's funny is I did kind of predict that in my video predicting the Stanley Cup final. I said that I thought the Edmonton Oilers would have one blowout win in this series, and they did in that Game 4. They had that 8-1 win. So as soon as that happened, I felt a little bit good about myself. But I mean, coming into this Game 7, I don't think it's maybe a little bit hyperbolic. There are people saying that this is perhaps the biggest game in NHL history. I don't necessarily know if I agree with that to that extent. But this obviously was a very big, very important game. Legacy-defining game in either direction, right? I truly think that if Florida had lost this Game 7 in this series, that it would have dramatically derailed the future of the franchise, losing back-to-back Stanley Cup finals, losing after going up 3-0. I think like no team since the 1960s had done that, if I remember correctly. And I think if they would have lost this series after going up 3-0, we would have seen some major changes for that franchise. And obviously this was I don't know if it was for the Oilers as much as it was for McDavid, a potential legacy-defining game as well, but I'll get to that later. But the Oilers getting to this point, even forcing a Game 7 at all is huge. If you think about what they did to get here, Oilers started the season 2-9-1, then they fired their coach. They brought in a rookie coach. Because I remember early in this season, I did a video talking about what had happened so far. And the Oilers were like towards the bottom of the Pacific, but towards the bottom of the league. And I remember, looking at Oilers fan sites, their Oilers subreddit, social media pages, Oilers podcasts, hockey media. There was genuine panic. There was panic about the team, all sorts of stuff. It was full on meltdown. But they fought their way back from that terrible start. Got into the playoffs. They were down 3-2 to the Canucks. They come back. They win 2 games in a row. They're down 2-1 to the Stars. Come back. They win that series. Then obviously they're down 3-0 to the Panthers. Between games 4 and 6, they're averaging 6 goals a game, which is just a crazy offensive output. For a Stanley Cup final, they forced the Game 7. Now, obviously Game 7 didn't go their way, but if you think of like the adversity that the Oilers went through all season and all postseason to get here, they had the best penalty kill perhaps in playoff history. I think it was 94% penalty kill or something like that, maybe a little bit better. Connor McDavid has 42 points through 25 playoff games. Only 2 players in history have had more points in the postseason, and those 2 players are Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux. Right, so there's a lot of positives there. But then the problems really came about in Game 7. McDavid and Draisaitl in Game 6 as well, but Game 7 especially, they were just kind of invisible. McDavid and Draisaitl, I believe they were held to only 2 shots total between them in Game 7. May have ended up being maybe 1 or 2 more than that by the end of the game, but at a certain point in the third period, the broadcast had mentioned that they'd only been held to 2 shots. And part of that, and this is something that I was really critical of, I think this happened last year in the playoffs as well, and I mentioned it then, and I thought with them bringing in the new coach it would have changed, but then he kind of just went back to this bad habit that previous coaches have done. But that was McDavid was playing way too many minutes. McDavid in particular, but that line that they assembled of McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman, I think that line played at least 10 minutes in the third period, and they were totally gassed by the time they pulled the goalie. If you watch the final 2 minutes of the game, you can find the full unedited 2 minutes on YouTube. They're just unable to do anything. It looks like they're walking in molasses. And it's I understand you need a goal, but how many times are coaches going to put McDavid and Draisaitl together and then leave them out on the ice way too long when that just doesn't work? We know McDavid is amazing, but he's still human. He needs to sit down. And I think I saw some stat that McDavid tallied almost 600 minutes throughout the postseason of ice time, which is the second most of all time. And it's just unsustainable, and you saw that in this Game 7. He needed to catch his breath, and he would have performed better if you were, shifting him at a regular rate. My personal opinion is he's probably more likely to score a goal because he gets that time to catch his breath. Not to mention the only goal that the Oilers scored in this Game 7 was from Matthias Janmark. So, McDavid didn't even, or Draisaitl or Hyman, didn't even this game, but they were still getting the bulk of the minutes. I would have liked to have seen more Janmark minutes. I mean, Matthias Janmark is a guy who has a hat trick in a Stanley Cup final winning game. And he had a goal in this game. Matthias Janmark is an underrated playoffs performer. I would have liked to have seen him getting some more ice time in the third period. But for me, the defining turning point in this game where I kind of felt like confident that the Panthers were going to win, there was an Oilers power play. They had the Panthers completely hemmed in their own defensive zone for the entirety of the power play. And one of the Florida players did not have their stick. I don't remember who it was, but he didn't have his stick. So it's basically a 5v3.5, because one of the guys doesn't have his stick. And that entire power play, they basically spent it in Florida's zone, and they were unable to get a goal. And not only were they unable to get a goal, they really didn't even get a good chance. And at that moment, I was fairly confident that Florida was going to win. The Panthers team that played in Game 7 looked a lot more like the team that played in Games 1, 2, and 3. They were forechecking more aggressively. They looked more confident. They had their swag back, I suppose you could say. And Bobrovsky, who was up and down in this series, games 4, 5, and 6, Bobrovsky did not look good. His save percentage was, I believe, down in the 700s. He returned to form in this game. He made some massive saves. There were some, I don't remember who it was, but there was that one where the puck was like right on the doorstep. Bobrovsky made a huge save on McDavid, and then I believe Hyman with a glove. A couple huge diving saves that could have easily been Edmonton goals. But Bobrovsky came back from those bad performances. He stepped up in this game. Not to mention there was that post pretty early in the first period for Edmonton. That's also going to be one that'll haunt them. One thing I liked about this game was there was wide open play, especially in that second period. That second period, I don't think there was a single whistle blown that I can remember. They were letting everything go. There was like a Panthers player who got slew-footed. Oilers players getting tripped. Referee did not care either way. Neither team got a whistle in the second. And honestly, it's kind of nice to watch. The period went by super quick. And it was like really fast-paced end-to-end play. I know different people have different opinions on the whole, different rule book for the playoffs, refs swallowing their whistle in the playoff thing, but it was exciting at the very least. I just have a couple notes here, just looking over. The third period felt like it was all Oilers as well. They had multiple high-quality chances in the third. They just couldn't finish them. And part of that is, and I don't know if this is going to end up coming out, but I think both McDavid and Draisaitl might be injured. Draisaitl, I heard some rumors about a hand injury. And that makes sense to me because his shot really felt non-existent. He had a couple one-timers and things like that just nothing really was going for him. And McDavid was just falling down all over the place. I don't know if that's just because he was tired or because he was injured or maybe a combination. But there were multiple times in this Game 7 where McDavid would have the puck and he would just fall down and there wouldn't be anybody near him. He wasn't getting hit, he just fell. And I thought that was really weird. I also thought Barkov in this series especially was kind of invisible. Be interesting to see if he was also dealing with an injury. A couple players I thought had a good game. Cody Cody Ceci had a really good game for the Oilers. He set up the end mark on the Oilers' goal in this Game 7. And Carter Verhaeghe had a good game. After kind of being non-existent the rest of this series, Carter Verhaeghe had been really important to Florida up to this point, but in this series he'd I think he was a -6. Don't quote me on that, but Verhaeghe had a bounce back game. Another coaching issue I had. So not only did I feel like Edmonton was playing the McDavid line way too many minutes, they pulled the goalie too late. I would have pulled the goalie with like three minutes left. There was a point in the game. The Panthers iced the puck. There was just under 4 minutes left, like maybe 3 minutes and 50 seconds or something like that. So the draw is going to be in the Panthers, and because they iced it. And the Oilers didn't pull Skinner. I would have pulled him at that point, right after the icing. I would have pulled Skinner, and you have about 3.5 minutes with an extra skater down a goal in Game 7. But the coach just pulled Skinner way too late. And by the time he did pull Skinner, the McDavid line was just gassed. They spent like 20 seconds behind the empty net trying to set up the play, and then the puck just kind of got stuck along the boards, and they were too tired to fight it out, and it was just it was a really sort of a whimper of an ending. I feel like this loss, I don't want to say the loss is all on coaching, but I feel like with better coaching decisions, the Oilers could have won this game. And that's not to take anything away from the Panthers. I don't want to say they played their best game of the series in Game 7, because I don't think that's true. I think they performed better in both Game 1 and Game 2 of the series. But they played closer to those Game 1 and Game 2 performances in Game 7, and their defensive system was good. They were shutting down, obviously, the top line. They were keeping the puck to the boards. They were forcing Edmonton to dump and chase. But just a lot of really questionable coaching decisions from Edmonton tonight. And I think the media is gonna, if they haven't, they should ask some tough questions of the coach. But it's really cool seeing Paul Maurice lift the Stanley Cup. Before today, he was the coach with the most wins without a Stanley Cup. So he has that now. Roberto Luongo got to lift the cup. The very first Tkachuk to get his name put on the Stanley Cup, that was pretty cool. For the Panthers, they lost in the Stanley Cup last year to Vegas. And it's hard enough to go to back-to-back cups, especially after you lose one. Losing a cup and then going right back to the cup final, that's tricky enough. But they came back and then they won it after almost giving up, which would have been probably the worst choke job in sports history. A generational slandering would have come their way. So I am happy for the Florida Panthers. We beat them, they come back, they get theirs. And we have back-to-back years now in the NHL where teams win their first Stanley Cup in franchise history. Vegas gets their first in franchise history. Then Florida gets theirs. And just a couple years ago, the St. Louis Blues got their first Stanley Cup in franchise history. So, all that's really cool. Looking forward, Draisaitl is eligible to sign an extension on July 1st. I expect he will. I don't think he has any reason to test free agency. if Edmonton would have been bad this year and missed the playoffs, I think there probably could have been a chance that he would have ended up looking elsewhere. But I think coming off this season, Draisaitl will probably extend for 11 or 12 million, something like that. And then the year after this, McDavid's eligible for an extension. The real problem in Edmonton is what to do with Nurse. He's making way too much money and was just completely terrible this series. I don't know what the CC situation is. I don't know what his contract deal is, but if I was Edmonton, I'd really try to keep Cody CC and Matthias Janmark as well. I don't know if they're under contract for next year or not, but just as an aside, also Sam Reinhart is an unrestricted free agent. He has the Stanley Cup final winning goal here. He had a pretty good season, more than 40 points, I believe, this regular season. I believe he has expressed that he wants to go back to Florida, so I do expect that he will, but we'll see what kind of offers he receives. But anyways, there we go. Congratulations to the Florida Panthers, and congratulations to the Edmonton Oilers. Honestly, this was just a great series. As a hockey fan, as a sports fan, this was an extremely entertaining series. A lot of good hockey was played, and it was intense. Even as a neutral, to be honest, I didn't really care which team won. I have friends who are Florida Panthers fans. I have friends and some viewers that are Oilers fans, so I can find happiness for those people in either way. But even as a neutral, these games were tense. I was on the edge of my seat because of how exciting they were. And I can't always say that. There's some years I watch a final and I just am kind of bored. But I did not feel that way this year. Anyways, let me know what you guys thought of this Stanley Cup final in the comments down below. If you liked the video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this almost every single day. And until next time, guys, bye bye.